There we go. And you're live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Pillars 3 Advisory Committee. I'm Olivia Pearson, Prince George's County Public Schools College Readiness Supervisor and Chair of the committee. I will kick it over to the co-chair to introduce himself and the other committee members.
Okay, thank you, Olivia. Dave Harper from Chesapeake College on Maryland's Eastern Shore, serving 5 counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kirkland Murray, Local Workforce Development Director in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, and President and CEO of AAWDC, but here representing the Maryland Workforce Association, which is an association of the 13 workforce boards that are partnering with the LEAs and the community college and implementing career counseling.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Banyas. I'm a former student member of the Howard County Board of Education, current student on Duke. To Nona, apologize.
No worries. So Nona Carroll, Deputy Director and Chief Program Manager at the Maryland Business Roundtable for Education.
Robin Werner, CTE Supervisor for Talbot County Public Schools. And I think that that's all of our members from our committee. So I'm going to pass this over to one of our guests, Lindsay.
Hi, good afternoon. Lindsay McCormick. I am Director of College and Career Readiness and Supervisor of CTE for Caroline County Public Schools on the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Lindsay. We have several guests also from we have one from our Governor's Workforce Board and from MSDE. And so I'm going to kick it over to Richard with MSDE to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Richard Kincaid. I'm the Senior Executive Director for the Office of College and Career Pathways at MSD. Kick it to the amazing rock star, Anthony Vargas.
Thank you. I am Anthony Vargas, and I am the Director of Advanced Academics and Gifted and Talented Programs from MSDE. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you both. Molly?
Hi, everyone. Molly Mesnar, Deputy Director of the CTE Committee in the Governor's Workforce Development Board.
Thank you again. And we have a couple of other invited guests. So I'm going to go to Christy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Dreyer, Vice President of Academic Programs at Cecil College, and I'm also here representing the chief academic officers for the community colleges in Maryland. Thanks for having me.
And Dawn.
Good afternoon. I'm Dawn Schonenberger. I'm the Vice President of Hagerstown Community College. And I am, this is my first interaction here as a group in this. So I am looking forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Awesome. What we have to say. Very excited to have you here. And of course, we're going to go right into Rachel A. With the AIB to give us some updates.
Hi there, glad to be here today and excited to bring you some updates. I'm joined today by Libby Diamond, our policy analyst for Pillar 3 and also 1. Today I have just a few updates as I'm trying to target and tailor them to Pillar 3. I am excited to share that we are almost done with our career counseling check-ins around the state. We've been meeting with each MOU set of partners for each county. So there's 3 different partners on each MOU, the local workforce board, the local education system, and the community college. And over the last probably month, we've been meeting with everybody and they have been very valuable meetings. So we're working on digesting all of that information to create a sheet to be able to share out with some high level takeaways of what we learned. And it led us to an idea that I think Kirk, you helped us come up with this, that it would be beneficial for all of the folks around the state who participated in these meetings to be able to hear from each other. The conversation was really rich, and that there were a lot of great strategies tried and efforts underway this year that would be beneficial for others around the state to hear. So that's coming. I also wanted to mention that the AIB and MSDE are currently reviewing LEA plans part 1, the first submissions that were submitted by the LEAs on March 15th, with their system-wide implementation plan. So we're working on that review process, norming feedback, and aim to have feedback back before the end of the month on part 1. And then we will anticipate receiving everybody's responses to part 2 on May 1st. So those are coming soon. I'm excited to share about a principals meeting that the AIB is hosting. We're hosting a Pillar 3 opportunity to connect, and Dr. Kerwin will be our keynote speaker, bringing that energy and passion like we saw at the career counseling convening here recently in the spring. And then after he does our kickoff, we will have some information to share with principals, and then Q&A. The intention here is to make sure that we can connect with school leaders, that they're getting direct access and information from the AIB about Blueprint, and that they have a connection to be able to bring any questions, suggestions, concerns, anything that we increase that collaboration with school principals. So if you're a school principal and wondering, how do I find out about this? Blueprint coordinators currently in each county have information about it. We've also reached out to the principal associations of every district, as well as MASSP and organizations like that. So we've got a few other targeted efforts to get information out to folks about that. If anybody listening is a school administrator, principal or assistant principal or principal supervisor, and you're not sure where to get that information, feel free to contact me and we'll get you the registration link. The event is on Thursday, April 25th at 4:30 in the afternoon. And we intend to record it, so we know that not everybody can always attend live, but we hope to have it available after the fact. And the last quick little tidbit to share about Pillar 3, on Thursday at the AIB's public meeting, we are excited to have Dave, Olivia, and Kirk coming to share some high-level feedback about the work of Pillar 3, about what this team has been doing really over the past year and maybe plus, just to really update our members and share the progress of the team, the many interactions you've had, the many guests that you've had. And Pillar 3 will be the focus when we open the meeting, so that we can share some updates with all of our stakeholders about Pillar 3 data, Pillar 3 implementation, and what's coming next. So it's an exciting time for Pillar 3. Are there any questions for me? I can put one other plug out that we do intend to do more recruiting around Pillar 3 here at the AIB. We anticipate to open additional policy analyst positions, and Libby really helps us with Pillar 3 on the not CTE side of things, really on the CCR side, and we have a separate position for the CTE side. So if somebody sitting out there has lots of expertise in that side of it and is interested, please feel free to reach out and or be on the lookout about positions coming, a position at the AIB for Pillar 3. That's all for me here if you have any questions.
That was a lot. Thank you so much, Rachel. Pillar 3 is so busy. So we're going to move now to Molly and Dave. I know you were compiling the feedback from our last meeting as it relates to CTE and IRC definition. So if you guys could give, any updates, that would be great.
Thank you, Olivia, and also thank you, Rachel. I'll share my screen just briefly here. Can you see our agenda?
Yes.
Okay, good. And when Rachel said that it's an exciting time for Pillar 3, I both appreciated it and privately wondered when it isn't an exciting time for Pillar 3 and CCR. Lots of good conversation always. So just a note that as you all know, we've been sort of methodically as a pillar moving through different pathways possible and defined by the CCR and blueprint legislation and by the CCR portion. So that being dual enrollment pathway, we covered in detail 2 months ago. The CTE pathway we covered last month. And this week's discussion is going to move forward to the Cambridge AP/IB pathway. But before we do that, just to acknowledge all the feedback that has been received on apprenticeship definitions, IRC definitions, and the accompanying core characteristics. Just a really intentional effort made by the CTE committee to speak to constituent groups, to meet with constituent groups, to provide links for surveys and to receive those responses. And I wonder if, Molly, you can update us on what the CTE committee is doing now with the feedback.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. So our apprenticeship guidance feedback just closed on Sunday, actually. And then prior to that, the industry recognized credentials second round of public feedback had closed. So I am presently in the process of reviewing all of the feedback submitted, both through the form, but also written feedback, such as, from your group via email, as well as feedback from stakeholder engagement sessions. And so right now, really just going through it, trying to kind of bucket things into different themes and recommendations and resources, and then really taking that and elevating what are recurring themes and seeing about ways that we might be able to address that, whether in our guidance or sort of in future recommendations and resources to develop. So it is an active process at the moment. And just want to thank everyone, for your feedback and insight and everything like that. So it's really, making sure our guidance is clear and, but also very valuable and rich. So just appreciate it, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone want to add? I don't think this will be a topic that update will take very long. I think we could probably move forward, but want to pause here just in case folks may want to add comments or thoughts. Okay. Well, shall we introduce our guest?
That sounds great. And so this afternoon, we have the pleasure of welcoming Anthony Vargas, who is going to speak to us about the IB, AP, and Cambridge pathways. And Anthony is currently at MSDE, and I will absolutely yield the floor to him. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm excited to talk to you all about where we are with this pathway. So let me share my screen. Share. I'm just gonna zoom out and share that piece of it. Okay, so what I'm going to share with you is the current work and current efforts that are going on as I'm working with our LEAs to take several steps back, right? Because this is today and there's a lot that got us to today, right? But to take several steps back and point out some things that got us to today. All of this was in partnership with our LEAs, right? It was important for us to collect feedback along the way and also do things that are probable and possible for the benefit of our students, right? So everything that you will see shared today was in partnership with selected LEA folks along the way, right? And so basically what you're going to hear highlighted a lot is the idea of what the AP pathway looks like, and you're going to hear a lot about this AP a part and piece to it, there's reasoning behind that. So there's several reasons. I'll talk about a few. The first is we are telling LEAs or working with LEAs to meet them where they are, right? And there is no current push or pressure from MSDE or any even ask at this point for LEAs to add additional pathways. We really want LEAs to work with and understand, analyze what are you currently doing, what are your current pathway options, and let's firm them up. Let's get a common understanding of where we currently are, and then in the future, sure, we can add pathways and we can continue to add as many pathways as we want. But for right now, let's just strengthen the current pathways that we have. And so that's one reason why AP is going to be mentioned a lot, because AP is in all of our school systems. Right now, ACE Cambridge, while it is an example of what folks could get into and what they could offer in a pathway, it's currently not offered in Maryland. And so we are not focusing heavily on that. And the IB program is currently offered in about a handful of schools across Maryland. And so that won't be the large focus of this discussion either. When we are talking about those programs, they are called out also specifically as diploma programming options, while AP is actually not called out specifically as a diploma programming option. So there had to be a little bit more working and a little bit more understanding on where we're going with the AP world and the AP end of things. So we at MSDE, we put together this guidance to basically walk LEAs through a step-by-step process to understand their current state of things and then to actually implement this pathway, their chosen pathway options. So let me walk you through. And so this is supposed to provide clear guidance, information, and next steps for local education agencies to implement their chosen college preparatory pathway. So the first thing that I walked through with the LEAs is we really do need to select it, who is a part of this implementation team, right? So basically, there's a few things there. One, I'm asking for a point person of this work who's actually going to oversee the creation and implementation of the pathway that I'm going to work really closely with. And so we are also saying that we're asking more than one person, right? We're asking a team to actually do this. And then we give some recommendations for who might be a part of that team. But that's really step one, getting clear on I am the one that's going to be representing and working with you through the IB, AP, and Cambridge pathways of your choice. Who from your LEA is going to be really the point person of this particular project, right? And so that's step one. Step two is understanding the LEA options. So LEAs and individual high schools have specialized advanced programming offerings unique to their locality, right? All across the state, we are offering different versions of these pathways. Therefore, MSD is providing guidance or guardrails so that LEAs may build upon their current program options. College preparatory options currently available or that will be available in our LEAs in the future are bulleted below. So those are the preparatory options. So again, right, we already spoke about and mentioned the Cambridge diploma, the IB diploma, and then there are a few acceptable AP diplomas that are currently out there. So the AP International Diploma and the AP Capstone Diploma are two that are currently working and in circulation. And then the final option is the Maryland AP option. And the Maryland AP option a lot of LEAs have saw it as a stepping stone, maybe to some of these diploma options. It is a set of 5 courses that are 5 AP courses that students would be enrolled in once they are CCR ready, and actually post CCR, right? But the Maryland AP option was really a part research study and part feedback study, right? And so we worked with the LEAs to say, what is, what is possible? What is probable? What are your challenges out there around AP, right? What do we see going on? Who are enrolled, who's currently enrolled in AP classes? What are the various issues that you're seeing with enrollment of AP classes? Are students able to complete them at a 3 or above or not? What challenges are you seeing there? Just various questions that were worked through with LEA members. And then there also was the research end. So we did do a statewide scan, and beyond a statewide scan, also, just asking folks and connecting with folks of what works and what doesn't work. But after all those conversations and after the statewide scan, after also comparing to AP Capstone, AP International, IB diploma, because it was important for the LEA folks and MSDE that there was some comparability in these different options, right? One option shouldn't be drastically different than another. After all of that, the Maryland AP option was created and is one of the options that the schools could complete. What I will also like to say is that through this work, all those degree or diploma programs plus the Maryland AP option, all of our LEAs are able to do one of the at least one of these pathways. So all of our LEAs already have the courses in place based on the previous year to implement at least one of these pathways. When I've been working with LEAs, I like imagery, I like metaphors a lot. And so when I've been working with our LEAs, it's really taking them through an understanding of, let's look at this from a library's perspective. Right now, you have all the books in your library. We just need to, organize them potentially in a different way, right? And so that has been the conversation. And so LEAs really, I've been working with LEAs to dig into what are their current options. After understanding the options, we can move on to step 3, which is really understanding the current practices in the LEA. And this is an important end at each high school within that LEA, right? It's not just the LEA. When we dig into, especially bigger counties that have multiple high schools, we need to make sure that as much as possible that the options are equitable, right? Just because you go to this high school, it shouldn't mean, right, if X high school can offer 2 AP courses, but Y high school can offer 15 to 20, we need to work on that, right? And figure out how are we able to offer more at that other high school. So step 3 is a very involved step. It really is the LEAs digging deep into what are they currently seeing across or at the high level or central office version of the LEA, but digging deep into what are we seeing at the school level and at the different schools. And so what we did is we just pointed them to some questions here for them to consider while they are going through this particular step. Step 4, after you've gained a really good understanding of your current practices in place, we're asking the LEAs then to select their actual option or options, right? While different high schools may have currently have different options available, to mitigate these inequities moving forward, the LEA should create plans to provide equal access across the county. And what MSD is prepared to do along the way is, and what I'm prepared to do along the way is roll up my sleeves and get down and dirty with creating some of this, right? And so as the LEAs are selecting their options, MSD is a true partner in this and wants to come in and work alongside as they pick. After step 4, we're asking the LEAs to then create specific guidance and exemplars. Each LEA is at a different starting point regarding AP class offerings and the diploma options that you saw above, right? So they'll use this guidance and other forthcoming guidance documents to be able to select, create their own pathways, and then create the guidance around those pathways. You know, every LEA, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be able to offer potentially something different. Not all LEAs offer even the same AP classes, right? You know, obviously they don't all offer IB and AP, right? But even within just looking at one of those programs, AP, they don't all offer the same courses. So it's really working in a tailored technical assistance through tailored technical assistance sessions with individualized LEAs to create their own guidance that works for them. Step 6 and step 7, we'll just go to both of those, are pretty similar. Step 6 is communicate that LEA specific guidance with exemplars to your folks, right? So the school leaders, the academic advisors, career coaches, counselors, teachers, other staff members. Step 6 is really just getting that out and communicating your actual guidance documents. And then step 7, we're asking the LEAs after they have all of that to then share and showcase some of your exemplars and specific guidance pieces with MSDE. So that is step 7, and that is where we are trying to get all of our LEAs to be. I will say that some LEAs are ready and raring to go, right? Meaning they are well past step 1, and some LEAs are currently at step 1, which is the reality of where we are. So I did put together a timeline. Again, this was created alongside LEA folks. It was important for us to make sure that their voice is a part of this and that they don't feel overwhelmed at any part or piece of this process. And so we're asking steps 1 and step 2 to be completed by the end of spring 2024. That's actually defined as by the end of each LEA's their particular end of school date or when students stop coming. Step 3 and step 4, we're asking to have done by summer of 2024. Step 5 and step 6, we're asking to have done by the end of fall 2024. And then we're asking to have these, at this point, these pristine, right, guidance pieces with exemplars to be communicated back by spring of 2025. And so this would be what the official ask is right now. I did include my contact information for all of them. And again, I told them and let them know I'm the point person, the contact for these AP, IB, and Cambridge pathways. So that is where we are. I will stop sharing my screen and I'd be happy to take any questions or.
Thank you. That was a great, I think, overview of kind of where we are and where we're going. I see that Nona has unmuted, so I'm going to let her provide, some comment.
Sure. So with the assessment phase, do you anticipate, I know that there are schools that have been implementing these different options. Do you know about what percentage of the schools currently have a program in place?
Yeah, so it's different, right? So the schools that currently have one of the diploma programs in place, it's a majority of them. There's only about a handful of schools that don't offer a current diploma option. And so those schools, we have been reached out. I have reached out and we're doing tailored technical assistance sessions, but it's about four school systems that do not have a current diploma program in place, right? But they do have the courses that would fulfill at least the Maryland AP option.
And with the course completion, then taking the exam is still not a requirement, or will it become a requirement for the students?
Yeah, so the exam as it sits right now with comparability to the other ones, right? So when we're looking at the diploma option, the AP diploma options, they do have to take the exam and get a 3 or better, right? With the Maryland AP option, right now, as it sits, they have to take 3 AP exams of the 5 courses and get a 3 or better. That is in line. Again, everything is attached to something. It's not just something that came from nowhere, right? And so that is currently in line with what's called the AP Scholar Award. That's what that looks like. So yes, right now, 3 of the 5 courses would need a 3 or better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave,
Yes,
I see you unmuted earlier, so maybe you want to go first if you'd like.
Lindsay just did so. So it will help
Oh, okay, I'm
also.
sorry.
It'll help us facilitators if you raise your hand under the reaction item and under the reaction option in Zoom. But Lindsay.
Good afternoon, Anthony. I think I actually have a meeting with you tomorrow. I'm from Caroline County.
Yes, I'm so excited.
But I do have one question. I did see in the guidance that students are still going to be able to take individual AP classes as opposed to the program pathway. Do you envision eventually having something like CTE has participant, concentrator, and completer? Do you envision that data is something that will be because students are able to take multiple pathways, so they might be a participant in the AP pathway, a participant in a CTE pathway, a participant in dual enrollment, but never actually complete any one program?
Correct. Yes. So yes, right? You're a simple answer. Yes, right? We do what we're really focused on first, right, is making sure that that the program, right, whether it's Maryland AP option, whether it's the diploma options, that the program is offered, right? That's really step 1 for us, is the program offered. Step 2 then is enrollment, right? So yes, absolutely. Tracking, monitoring all pieces of what does enrollment look like, or as you put, participating in the pathway, right? And then step 3 is really then focusing on and putting more structure in place for what completion looks like.
And I guess I only ask because that is currently what our students are currently doing. They're dibbling in AP, they're dibbling in dual enrollment, and then they might take. So I don't quite see if a student can do that and not be a part of the program. How is that any different than what we're currently available? And what is the draw for a student to say, I want to be an AP Maryland AP diploma completer? What is that draw for them?
Yeah, so I think that the major reason behind and I don't want to speak because I don't want to speak for the creators of the original law, but my understanding, right, behind this was that we want to ensure there are actual pathways so that kids aren't just taking randomized courses as much as possible, right? Sure, there are kids that are going to jump around, and it was important. A lot of the feedback from the LEA folks was it's important to acknowledge that we aren't going to pigeonhole kids into a particular pathway either, right? That's not always a benefit to the kids' college and career plans, right? And so there has to be some flexibility because it has to be what's beneficial to the kid, and what's beneficial for one kid might not be beneficial to another kid. And so, you know, that's just the easy answer for that end. I will also say that all of the diploma programs, you do get the diploma option with it, right? So if you complete the AP Capstone diploma, then you get the AP Capstone diploma, right? So
That
that's
included with just the Maryland option? Is there a diploma that goes along with the
So
Maryland?
the Maryland option, there is not a diploma program that goes along with it. However, you will be awarded the AP Scholar Award if you complete the Maryland AP option. The Maryland AP option was created again from feedback, mostly from our LEA folks, because they also felt like, you know, a lot of our kids aren't taking 6 AP courses. And not only are they not taking 6 AP courses, we're struggling to offer 6 AP courses. When you look at the diploma specific options also, there are specific classes that you have to take to fulfill that diploma option. So our folks at the LEA said, is there any way we can make this more flexible and more open, right? And so that led us to the Maryland AP option to ensure that kids can still have an AP pathway, an AP track, right? But not be locked into some of the standards that, quite frankly, LEAs were cautious on right now because they don't see their kids, their students completing at that level, right? For the AP Capstone diploma, not only do you have to take all 6 of those courses, but you also have to get a 3 or above in all 6 of those courses. And you have to take specifically the seminar course and the research course. And our LEAs just weren't positioned to offer all of that right now. So the Maryland AP option comes from really the LEAs wanting to have another option, another choice. And some have called it, I don't call it this, but some have called it a stepping stone or a window into hopefully in the future, these diploma options.
Thank you.
Thank you
Christy,
so much.
Christy, I saw your hand early on.
Yeah, so I know Peter put his hand up too. I just don't want to jump in line. Peter, you good? Okay.
You go ahead.
Thank you. Anthony, thank you so much. It's been really helpful, very interesting. I have a couple of questions, so bear with me. Concerns that if students do not get the 3, how does that impact their potential graduation or completion? And does it?
So it doesn't. It can't right now because here's the way that it also has to operate. We know that a lot of these students are going to take these classes in senior year. And we also know that scores don't come back until the summer, right? And so to a student, the idea of completion, even of something like one of those diploma programs, depending on how quickly College Board gets it to them, the idea of completion might not ever matter as strictly to a student because they're going to take, in our mind, they probably will have to take some senior level courses and they won't potentially get the scores back until after they've already left the K-12 space.
So, thank you. So then I have 2 more.
Yes, please.
So, transfer. We know that sometimes transfer of AP credits can be a challenge. And how do we plan to address that? And that may be beyond you, but I think that's a concern I would have.
When you're saying transfer, you're saying transfer
to a 4-year institution or a 2-year institution.
Yeah, I do. I agree. I think that's a challenge. I think that there's a lot more communication that needs to be done around that. A lot of our students, sure, there are students that stay inside state and they pick a 4-year public university with us, but there are students that pick a private university or they pick outside of Maryland, right? And so there's a lot of sticking points there that I think create a lot more conversation around that.
And so then, sorry, go ahead, Olivia. I'm
I
sorry.
just have a piggyback on that. So not to change the subject, but even with the 3, I know College Board, says that the 3 is the passing score, but we also have found that as being a challenge for transferability. And so I think, that may be a whole separate meeting in itself as
I
it
agree.
relates to,
Agreed.
to all of
Yeah.
this.
I agree. I completely agree because there's also, we picked the 3 for several reasons, right? But there's also, there's some research out there that we can point to that shows that, students just sitting in an AP class and getting the AP course and then scoring a 2 has been beneficial to them in their education post K-12, right? And so I agree, and this brings up so many other points. Yes.
And I know legislation was passed and you accept a 3. And I will say the community colleges have embraced that and the intent of that legislation. I can't speak for any of other partners, but I can say the community colleges have really embraced that tenet from that legislation. And I guess my last one is, why would a student choose AP instead of dual enrollment? Because I think, dual enrollment could offer some of the same opportunities, or in some cases more. So I guess I'm curious how you see that. And maybe it's not the dichotomy that I see. So understanding my bias with community colleges.
I do think that community colleges, that 4-year institution, what have you, can offer some of this, some same or some similar coursework. I do think that it's very specific, right? So there are certain courses that are able to be offered at this community college that are not offered in another community college or another situation, right? And so I think, again, just as it's particular to the student, I think it's particular of the partnership between the university setting and the K-12 setting on what's happening. I think it's this perfect triangle of amazingness when we get that just right. But I don't see that there's always a clear delineation between you should take this AP class versus you should take this dual enrollment class. And I would say vice versa on that end.
So really you're talking about having options for students.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great meeting you.
I think Robin's had her hand up for some time.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, Anthony. I have, there's a few things I just wanted to put out to the group just so it could be in our notes for later. It's not necessarily questions for you, but I do have a couple questions for you also. One thing I wanted to add was Lindsay brought up a good point about some of the data collection, because her and I are familiar with the CTE world of how we collect data for students who enter pathways and complete pathways and their performance. And I think that it would be really helpful that there's some sort of mechanism for collecting similar data for all of the pathways that we are offering, whether it's dual enrollment, CTE, AP, whichever one it is, but a similar tool so that we can really dive into data after we've gone through these programs in a couple of years to see, like Lindsay was saying, how many kids are still jumping into different pathways and going in and out, how many of them are staying in one, what's the success rate. But I would say that this committee is something to consider. Is there a way that we can recommend like a way for that or similar verbiage or whatever? I'm just thinking out loud right now that those are some things that we might want for data collection down the road. The other thing was the diploma. I was wondering, and this again, it's not really, I don't think you can necessarily answer this question, but just posing this to the group. Will we have similar diploma options for other pathways? So a student who completes dual enrollment, especially if they get their associate's degree or, complete, because I know we've talked about different levels within dual enrollment or CTE or whatnot. Are we going to offer a similar diploma to recognize those pathways? And then how are we going to keep track of scores for AP? I know those come out in July. So if you have a student who's a senior and took a couple classes their senior year, how do you give them the diploma that recognizes that if they have already graduated.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying, right? I think that these are all issue areas that I know, at least from my end at MSDE, we would love some uh brainstorming together, some work together, right? And some potential workarounds or exemplars or examples from what you have, right? Yeah, that is a challenge, that is an issue. The idea of these a lot of them are going to take it senior year and the scores aren't going to come out until later, right? And so how do we wrap around or work around some of that? Yeah, I think that's a real thing.
So
And I have one more question for you. And I'm sorry, Dave, I didn't want to overload you with like 5 questions at once, Anthony. One more is thinking about when we talk about transferring, and I know we were talking about to colleges, but it got me thinking about transferring to other LEAs. So in CTE, we already have similar courses, but the CTE committee is going to help us align to an overall framework so that any student across the state, if they take a program in Caroline County and then they go over to Hartford County, it doesn't matter because they're following the same framework. Now for AP, I know that is also a framework because it's through College Board. However, one thing to consider is that different LEAs have different models in their scheduling. Some LEAs have year-long classes, like Talbot, where I'm from. We have year-long classes. However, some of our neighbors have semester classes. So I'm thinking of students who in Talbot might move over to another county and they haven't completed the coursework, but they might be entering a county that has already completed that class. And what do we do in those situations? And I know I'm getting into the weeds of it, but I just think that it's things to consider of how can we unify things across the state? Is it even possible? Or are we just going to run into those things sometime? But maybe surveying the whole state of who does what and when, like, do you offer semester? Is it something that, maybe some of the counties that don't offer it semester, we should reconsider? Just thinking about that for students and accessibility. If, again, following similar patterns and policy and just procedures for each of these 3 pillars, I think is going to be really important for data collection.
I agree. Yeah, I think that those are challenges that, sure, I do believe maybe there could be some additional communication around some guardrails to try to stop those things from happening. However, we probably are going to see a small number of that happening regardless, right? We do have the reality also out there is that we do have different AP, let's take AP for instance, different AP courses are offered at all of the different counties, right? And so I could be at this county and be in an AP course, and then maybe it's not offered at the next county that I'm transferring into, right? And so that's a big challenge in and of itself, right? And that has historically almost always happened in Maryland, but I don't believe that it always that it always needs to, right? There are some potential, I think, some guardrails, some thinking points that we could try to work through.
Thank you, Anthony and Robin. And I'm going to basically try to kick it to Peter quickly because he's had his hand up for a long time, but I wanted to comment on a couple of the things that have been stated, and they're very helpful because the conversations that we have around each of these pathways, they tend to center around the models and the best practices, the way we measure success, the way we communicate and share data. And even though Maryland is very colonial, often to our credit, in terms of having locally responsive education at the community college level and at the LEA level, and we have a lot of flexibility, sharing all the common goals, which we do with Blueprint, as we share data as consistently as possible and best practices as consistently as possible, it will have a kind of normative effect and help us to kind of come alongside each other and help each other at least with ideas and information. But just a shameless plug, every once in a while I fly my community college colors unabashedly. So I just wanted to piggyback on a Christy Dreyer's statement and note that sometimes our dual enrolled classes can also include embedded industry recognized credentials, or IRCs, and that could be an extra boost. So a student can walk away. I mean, I was an AP student when I was in high school, and I had a great experience with Mr. Smith. I really did. We also offer transcripted, durable, portable credit, usually with gen eds, and sometimes those include IRCs. And so we're proud of that value that we offer. So Peter, yeah.
Thanks, Dave, and I'm glad Mr. Smith had that kind of impact on you. Very glad. So I have two main questions. The first is more of a philosophical one, which is blueprints, that this big idea of trying to build equity and provide this transformation to how we do schooling. And I appreciated what you talked about of increasing these different pathways and opportunities for students, since we're seeing really different levels of just opportunities in different counties, even within different schools within the same county. And I remember caring a lot about that back when I was in in high school, trying to register for classes that were not offered at my school, but they were offered at other schools within the same county. And part of that is, I learned, a whole complicated equation of staffing and enrollment of students, and you have these vicious cycles that go on. So rather than dive too much into just what is this designation of completion, which I have questions on, but I'll put that aside for a second. Are there any things we can do at the state level to actually substantively impact or change the way that, or help LEAs offer more of these classes to students, rather than just going through asking them, what are you offering, and just putting it on paper, if that sort of makes sense? Like, is there anything we can substantively do?
Yeah, so there's a few areas that we could go down this road in, right? So the first, I will say that all LEAs, our point and our purpose right now is to meet LEAs where they are and then help them grow, right? I would love to see the day where every LEA can offer every pathway, right? That's fantastic, right? And that's what we should be working towards, right? So to speak. So that end. I will say that there's some things that are right now help that is in place for our LEAs. So one example is, okay, you don't offer a certain course in your, let's pretend like you don't offer a certain course in your LEA, but we have students that want to take that course, that AP course, right? Right now at MSDE, we do have an approved vendor list, right, of all of our AP courses and all of our AP offerings, and you could work with that approved vendor. It does come at a charge, right? The vendor is going to charge you, but you can work with that approved vendor to offer that course to that student, right? And so that is currently in place. That's in place, ready to go tomorrow, right? For any LEA that wants to do that, for any student that doesn't have that opportunity. It also is working alongside that LEA to think about what is your particular situation, then MSDE can come in to help, right? So for some, I'll give you another example of that. So for some LEAs, they are actually thinking about, okay, we can offer it at this high school, but we can't offer it at this other high school, and they're in that particular situation. Some of them are like, okay, our way of doing this, because we can't bus kids around and we're not going to bus kids around, where some LEAs are like, I want to bus kids around. That's the direction that we want to go in. And if it's going to work for you, I'm going to allow you to do it. Let's do it, right? For what's best for kids. But some LEAs are like, we just can't do this. So MSDE can come in and work with them to support it in a virtual format, right? So we can come in and say, hey, these kids in this high school might be zooming in for this class, right? And then other high school, you might be zooming in for this other class. Is that, in my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, the long-term solution of all of this? No, right? I would love to see kids be able to participate in a in-person, and right, or at least have the option to do so. But for now, those are some solutions that we're working through with LEAs.
Gotcha. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I actually
Absolutely.
took a class for math in that exact situation where I was on a Zoom joining another class. Wild, but it's a great bridge to at least offer that rather than not offer that. So
Absolutely. And
applaud you
so
for working.
thank you. We are working with our LEAs to show them that that is a possibility and that MSDE can help set up that situation for you because they have in the
Thank you.
past. Absolutely.
As for
Thank you.
the vendor point, is that currently actually being used by LEAs? Do you have any knowledge of that? Okay.
Yeah, so it the thing is that it's not just AP courses that are approved on the vendor list as well. There
Okay.
are other courses that are approved on the vendor list. And so it is tapped in here and there from our LEAs, but it's not a major thing that it's not major. Like it's not like so many kids are signed up for this situation. But yes, there are courses that students are in.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you. And last point, I'll wrap this up. When I go home and I chat with my brother to hear what the word on the street is, right? What are kids really up to these days? I am hearing, at least at his school, I don't know if this extrapolates everywhere, but there's been a tremendous rise in the number of students going towards dual enrollment programs for classes like English, whereas there used to be most of that body of students going towards AP English. And a big problem is that it looks great on paper, right? We have more pathways, more options for students. But then because you have less students opting for the in-school, like in-person AP classes, the enrollment and staffing numbers in the equations get messed up. So they're unable to offer those programs as much. And I'm really concerned because it sounds like we're all excited about building these more pathways, and I'm all for it. But the number of students in a school is not going to change. If we start making more pathways, then you're going to lose the critical mass that is necessary to have a teacher at a school who can teach AP Physics, who can teach those actual classes that are necessary for the pathway. And if we start to splinter all of our students along these different pathways, we might lose that human capital of those institutions that might be essential for them to actually work. So I'd be curious how you think about that problem.
Yeah, so I will say that I've seen that uptick as well, right? And I've heard it in working with our schools that there's been several instances where people have come to me and say, "Oh, well, we're particularly interested in the dual enrollment pathway anyway, so that's kind of where we're going to go." I will say, and I also agree with you, I do not want to splinter kids into a specific, you have to do this pathway lockdown, that's it, you're done, right? We do want to create as much flexibility as possible, but also have some structure to what's going on, right? And not have kids just taking a random dual enrollment course or several random dual enrollment courses. And same with the AP pathway. We don't want kids just taking several random AP classes or AP courses, right? What I will also say is that there is, I don't know what grade your brother's in, and you don't have to share, right? But there is a resurgence currently happening in the AP world as well. Around that particular point, this year in the state of Maryland, we piloted AP seminar as English 10. And so those two courses are actually one and the same. And so what we're going to see over time, there's more schools that are going to sign up for that next year and the following year and the following year. We're seeing that really take off in our school systems. And we have cohorts now, but we're going to see whole grade levels of 10th graders, right, in AP seminar, which is exciting for me in a lot of ways. I hope that gets at my thoughts on what you were saying.
One cool thing has been that these conversations have really drawn a lot more partnership, in detail, depth partnerships between workforce boards, local business industry, community colleges, LEAs, and to Peter's point and to what you're saying, one thing that the Eastern Shore counties have done is had a counselor sign off on the dual enrollment courses that students take to make sure they're in line with the academic goals of the student. And the council, of course, is aware of the school's LEA goals. And so just trying to make it as a coordinated a collaboration as possible.
Yeah, and I think we're in the business of continuous improvement, right? So a lot of these things are tweaks a lot of times, right? A lot of these things are maybe pivots a lot of times, but it's just because a few things. One, we all know what our experience was, good or bad, right? And we want to make the experiences the best we can for students of tomorrow, right? And so we're constantly going to be in this game of tweaking and iterating, iteration, right, and continuous tweak. But thank you for sharing that and elevating that.
I also think that, with AP, a lot of our students start the AP before they do dual enrollment. And so, they absolutely can coexist in how we do it now. But I think to Peter's point, as we're moving to these post-CCR pathways, understanding, does that mean that AP doesn't start until after 10th grade? And then what does that mean for the students and kind of splitting those teachers? And I'm thinking about, small school that I've worked with in the past that had multiple programs in the school. And so they had IB and AP, and it was almost impossible for a small school to be able to offer both of those simultaneously. And so I think that as each year, of course, we're learning more, we're seeing more. That's going to be something that's going to tease out, I think, as the blueprint unfolds from one year to the next.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And to, the point earlier, once we get really good about looking at our data points and collecting participation rates and collecting completion rates, that's going to be able help us to be able to check in with that, monitor that, and provide some pivot points.
Olivia, you just brought up a good point about students starting AP later, right? Because we also have students who start taking AP classes in 10th grade, sometimes even in 9th grade. So I'm just thinking about the timeline for this. If students do not enroll until after they are CCR, that would mean that in theory, they wouldn't start taking courses in a pathway until 11th grade. So in order to get this diploma, they would have to do an entire schedule their junior year in the courses to get the scores in time for a 3 or higher.
Well, yeah, so and that's why the recommendation out there right now and the wording out there right now is that students may still participate in AP classes without officially being enrolled in a pathway. There are courses that we are going with College Board, and the idea that these are AP access courses, right? So we look at something like AP Computer Science Principles. That is a freshman class in a lot of our LEAs, and it's a huge freshman class in a lot of our LEAs. That's not going away, right? We look at AP Seminar in English 10. That is specific to AP Seminar in English 10, right? Not English 11, not English 12. And so that's not going away. That's actually only growing. There are a few other AP access courses. They're saying AP of African American Studies is an AP access course, and there's a couple other AP access courses that students will continue to participate in without being officially enrolled in the pathway.
I totally understand that. I think where the disconnect is from an LEA, we wouldn't have the funding of them being CCR student because we wouldn't have had them test yet. So and CTE is the same way. I mean, my district, and I know I'm not alone, we have a lot of students who start intro classes in 9th or 10th grade, but this comes down to the funding because we already have a lot of expenses with dual enrollment and AP that we didn't always have before from an LEA, and it's a good thing. I mean, I don't want students to have to pay for these things, but Although we can have them taking them in 9th or 10th grade, with having more students in some of these programs that we didn't already pay for, that is going to definitely impact us from a funding standpoint.
Sure, and I apologize. I don't have any answers on anything to do with funding right now. I do know that that is something that is we are constantly talking about and working through, right? I don't know what the recommendation out there is going to end up being, but even in that particular example, we might come out with something that kind of challenges or pushes back on what you're saying. But I can't speak to that because I don't know if that's going to be the case. But thank you. I think that's very important that it gets elevated that yeah, there's a lot of dipping into funding questions that need to come up now.
Absolutely. And Anthony, don't feel bad because we talk about funding every meeting and we
Okay.
are full aware that everything is still being worked out. So no
Okay.
reason for the apology. Lindsay, I saw you had your hand up at one point. I didn't know if
I did, thank you. Robin kind of covered what I was going to say. It was about funding. But my only additional point is that I feel like if districts only had the funding and only pay for AP exams for students who are CCR, we're starting earlier with limiting equitable access for all students, which is exactly what the blueprint does not want. It's the opposite of what the blueprint wants. So the prior, the AP access courses and those exams, it is a concern because then, yes, you can offer them, but if then only the students who can afford to pay for the exams will be enrolling, and that's a true concern of mine.
Yeah, I do believe that that's a concern as well. I agree with you. I do believe that that's concerning. And I will say on the, taking a different end of something that I think should be highlighted there as well. When we're thinking about these AP Access courses, they are meant to open you up to taking AP in the future too, right? And so not that and again, let me be clear, I'm not saying don't take tests, don't do this, don't do that, right? But the experience of sitting through that AP class, and sure, the experience of taking the test, but the experience of doing those things in an AP Access course is what's meant to say to what we're hoping as a kid then sits there and says, oh yeah, I can do this. I can sign up for future AP courses, which is really, really, I just want to highlight and elevate a huge purpose of the AP Access course.
I agree with that. And all the research that I've done on AP Seminar, I concur with what you're saying, Anthony. I think though we get looked at as to what does our data show as to the number of students who are enrolled in AP courses versus take AP exams versus passes AP exams.
Yep.
And so if we are being held accountable to that data, then we obviously are encouraging all students to take the assessment. But then so it is a
absolutely. Yeah.
And I want to add one step, and I'm going back to that transferability. And so I think that that's also a great additional data point to continue to look at, because if we're looking at this whole continuum, right, it's not stopping when we get these scores. We're supposed to be following these students through their careers. And so how does this help you in the long term? And so I think that having all of that data and tracking all that data then becomes even more important.
Quick note that we're excited that our success rates over the past year have been north of 80% for dual enrolled courses. And so that means 80% of students enrolling are getting transcripted credits, and those are in the core gen eds that are transferable. So anyway, I know we're wrapping around near the conclusion.
We are. One other thing I would say, just as we're talking about AP and dual enrollment, and I think, again, as we progress deeper into the blueprint, it's going to unfold more. But you know, right now AP has a front end, excuse me, dual enrollment has a front end hurdle, right? So the students have the GPA, the students have to meet some qualifier to be able to enroll in a dual enrollment course. Sometimes we have a student who, let's say they're not doing well in some of those other courses, but they're an amazing artist. And then we can recommend that they take AP art, and then that qualifier is then non-existent. And so I think that that's another push and pull as we talk about AP and dual enrollment, you know, how they can kind of work together, because right now it's a little different as it relates to accessing both of those opportunities. Anything else that's quiet, which is different for this group, that may mean we're coming to an end of the conversation.
There may yet be some comments on AP pathway and Cambridge IB, but just noting that I think there's only one pathway left to us. I think it's the support pathway. So we've gone through CTE and dual enrollment and the AP pathway. And so the support pathway is probably next on our agenda to consider collectively.
Absolutely. And I think, oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to now that we've really gone through various pathways and like what they look like and kind of having an overall picture of what it could look like for kids in these different pathways. I just want to point out the mathematical side to all of this and the logistics from an LEA. So we brought up a lot of pieces about funding, and it's not all about funding. I don't want it to be like I'm only thinking about this for money, but that is a big piece for LEAs to consider. We're also trying to get 45% of our students in IRC or an apprenticeship. And really, the gold standard is a school to apprenticeship. It is going to be very difficult to try to meet the demands of all three pathways at the same time, because students are going to end up having to make a choice at some point. And there's going to be competition at some point, especially when we offer different types of degrees for different programs. And we have to think about this from an investment in our teachers as well. So if we are pushing to get 45% of our students in an apprenticeship, it's going to be very unlikely that 45%, if we were to get there, and I know that it's not expected that every LEA is going to get to 45% next year, or for some, maybe never, like some of the smaller counties. But just using that as an example for now, if we have 45% of our students going towards an apprenticeship or an IRC, then that means I only have 55% remaining to go into a dual enrollment and AP. And if that is cut in half, I'm looking at around a quarter of students to put into AP, maybe. And I'm just throwing out some numbers right now, but thinking about that from an LEA with offering courses. So I'm in a small district. We cannot really afford to offer courses that have less than 10 students, because we're going to need classes. We're going to need that teacher for other courses. If we're doing our job in other areas for Pillar 3 of trying to meet these goals, eventually one is going to give, to meet the other, because it's going to be very hard for students to do an apprenticeship and to take 5 AP classes in 11th and 12th grade and have room in their schedule to leave early. And I know that we're being told to be flexible with their time, and we are. A lot of us already are offering options for students to do apprenticeship over the summer, in the evenings, etc. But it is going to start to compete with one another, and it's going to be hard to meet the goals. And it's going to get to a point where if we're doing well in this area, that might mean that other areas were hit, similar to what Peter was talking about with dual enrollment. And that puts an LEA in the position of, do we offer this class which then goes to what everyone has been saying about access, because some schools might not be able to access. So I just wanted to throw that out there for this committee to think about, of the feasibility of this, now that we're looking at this from a more like global perspective of the entire pillar and all of the pathways, and what the courses could look like, or different pathways could look like, and what that might mean for actual implementation.
I think we have a hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make it brief because I know we're running out of time. I don't know. I point well taken, Robin. I don't disagree, but I think they're not mutually exclusive, because many of the dual enrollment courses also have industry recognized credentials embedded in them. So students are often picking up multiple things if they're, taking them dual enrollment courses or doing something at a community college. So I just wanted to put that plug in there that again, your point's well taken. It's a lot to manage and corral for students, but very often, you're hitting multiple milestones with one access to, I'm going to plug community colleges, because you're taking a course that has, some IRC embedded in it. So sorry, I'll stop now because I know it's getting.
And I agree. My point was more towards the AP, because I do see, and from working at high schools and working with Chesapeake College, like our students have a lot more flexibility with dual enrollment and taking online classes and having classes in our school. I think I was thinking about this, and I should have been more specific, like seeing this from the AP pathway, just because of the demands of those courses.
Kirk, do you want to give us our final comment on this topic?
Well, I have a question. So bringing this back to career counseling, what should the career counselors or the career coaches be doing to educate students on this pathway, or helping them to identify careers that align to this pathway?
You're speaking specifically to the AP pathway?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is going to be around step 5, right? So the idea is that we're going to work, again, there is no one message fits all for everyone. I will tell you that MSDE did just recently bring a few other folks on board in the counseling arena. And what we are currently working through is putting out, again, it's going to be super zoomed out, because it has to be, because everyone's offering something different. But we're currently working on kind of a split screen, almost, so to speak, of like, what does AP look like, and why an AP pathway, versus what does dual enrollment look like, and why a dual enrollment pathway, versus what does CTE look like, and why a CTE pathway, versus what does it mean to mix and mingle, right? The things that, before we can do that, though, we do need to get a little bit more solid on what are the guardrails for all of the options, right? But before we can get there, but once we are more solid on there, then yes, that type of information will come out. And really, from a counseling or a career coach leadership standpoint, and working with them with understanding generally the options, and then going into what it looks like at your particular LEA.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And this, I feel like, leads to our next 2 meetings. And so I know next week we're supposed to be talking about the support pathway, which really is, how do we support students who may need the academic supports on any of these post-CCR pathways that they choose. And so I would like to propose that we pair that meeting with our meeting on blending pathways that would be in June. So we had planned to do that in June. So I'm proposing that we do that combined meeting, because I feel like it all goes together for May. And then June, we talk about an update on career counseling, and then also plan our calendar for school year 25 as to which topics we need to discuss as it relates to Pillar 3.
Thank you for that suggestion, because it really highlights that in a way, I misspoke when I talked about the support pathway, because it's not a fourth pathway. It's support for the other pathways and wrapping students into that. So it's an integrated conversation, just like the pathways themselves, the flexibility that students may pursue more than one at a certain time.
Question, this point of clarification. So Olivia and Dave, what you're saying is the support pathway is supporting students who are on a post-CCR pathway. Is that correct?
Or it's supporting students who need it so they can become CCR, but we are not to prevent a student from a post-CCR pathway if they're not meeting that CCR
Okay.
benchmark.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I just want to clarify because I want to make sure that we do spend some time talking about how do we support those students who are not CCR ready to make sure that they are prepared to either go to college or enter the workforce. Okay.
Absolutely. And that being, again, on these pathways.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I see a lot of heads nodding. So we are in agreement that we are going to take a look at how we support students who may not be CCR and so that they can participate in pathways. In addition, we can go one step further and talk about how these pathways can blend, because I feel like a lot of this conversation that we're having right now is really tied back to that as well.
I think I've got it for the notes, and as well as Robin's recommendation from earlier about sharing data consistently across pathways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's going to be a loaded meeting in May. And June, I'm hoping we can kind of wrap up with career counseling. I know it's been a lot and everyone is in different places. And so maybe we do a check-in with career counseling and then really talk about some of the topics we need to schedule out for school year 25. All right. Anyone have any final comments before we close this afternoon?
Thanks to our guests. Very helpful. Thank you, Anthony.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anthony. I know this is a very spirited group, so you got to hear all of it.
Thank you. No, honestly, thank you guys so much for sharing, for your questions, for the thoughts, for the community. It was great being here, but to see how we can professionally disagree at moments too. I was learning and taking some notes, right? So I loved how you guys modeled working together this afternoon. So I'd be happy to come back, maybe not in the front seat, but maybe so, right? And then could I specifically say, specifically, I want to say thank you to Peter for I love the student voice example, and I think that we can learn so much more from student voice. And so I so appreciate you being on this panel particularly and for your questions today, sir.
Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate you being here as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, we're going to close, and absolutely everyone here today is invited to next month's meeting. And we hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Great afternoon, everyone.